So your plan for this election was to come to women and say, forget the economy, forget immigration. Roe v. Wade was overturned. It's now a states' right issue as opposed to a federal issue. You thought that was going to be enough? You thought it was going to be enough for you to look at black men and say to black men, you're misogynistic and chauvinistic, and that's the reason why you're not voting for Kamala Harris? You thought it was going to be enough for the Latinos to bring up immigration when you're not paying attention enough that the Cubans think different than the Dominicans, and the Cubans think different than the Colombians, and they think different than the Venezuelans, and the Guatemalans, and the Puerto Ricans, and the Mexicans, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of these Latinos in America want the borders closed.
Cameras roll, coffee clinks, and before anyone can exhale, the internet swears it just watched a political intervention disguised as a podcast. Reports and reaction clips claim Stephen A. Smith walked into Bill Maher's studio smiling and left the Democratic establishment blistered. Fans are shocked, timelines are split, and emotions ran high as short edits circulating online paint a night of hard truths and hurt pride. So your plan was what? Lectures and slogans? One viral caption quotes him as saying, while Maher, according to viewers, leans in and fires back with a weary, I'm angry because nobody's protecting my issues anymore. From that moment, the room, at least in the clips people are sharing, feels like a pressure cooker. Whispers say staffers' phones lit up. Party loyalists bristled, and the political family was left divided. Was this a genuine reckoning or just immaculate timing? Did Stephen A. really call out a coronation strategy? Or are edits exaggerating the sting? Don't tell voters what to feel. A trending summary insists, he snapped, as Maher nods like a man who's done trying to be polite. Rumor meets reality. Ego meets echo.
The end of this thing Friday is that I'm pissed at the Democrats because my issues, democracy, the environment, have no protectors now. Because you blew the election, I have nobody standing up for the two issues that are my issues.
Which is?
Democracy and the environment. My two most important issues. Those are not priorities in the new administration.
Okay.
In fact, they're antagonistic to both of them. So I have no champion in Washington. They have the courts, they have the House and the Senate, and you totally left me.
Echo chamber, and you can almost hear the oxygen leave the set. If the chatter is even half true, tonight's conversation isn't about who wins, it's about who finally listens. The studio lights were warm but tense, the kind of glow that feels both calm and confrontational at once. People online say that when the cameras started rolling, there was laughter at first, small talk, jokes about coffee, sports, and the chaos of social media. But beneath that laughter was a strange kind of energy. The quiet before something heavy drops. Stephen A. Smith leaned forward in his chair.
And now Maher's upset that accountability is catching up to that kind of behavior. Come on, you can't scream threat to democracy when your side finally gets fact-checked. But Stephen A., he didn't waste time feeling sorry. He cut right to the chase. His biggest issue? Arrogance. Pure, blinding arrogance from the Democratic Party.
Here's my issue, generally speaking. We can talk to the economy, immigration, crime in the streets, blah, blah, blah. Here's my ultimate issue. The arrogance of the Democratic Party.
I'm saying the same thing.
Arrogance of, we're saying the same thing in two different ways. The arrogance of the Democratic Party. So, Biden doesn't decide to run for re-election. You grease the skid so he doesn't have to go through a primary. June 27th, he shows up and he embarrasses himself. And positions naturally for the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, to ultimately ascend and become the Democratic nominee. But the last time we saw her in a primary,
His voice steady but sharp, and according to witnesses in the audience, you could feel the air shift when he said, "You can't keep lecturing people like they don't have their own minds." Bill Maher, usually the one firing off his trademark sarcasm, didn't cut him off. Instead, he nodded slowly, the way someone does when they know exactly what's coming and maybe even agree with it. Spread that Maher had already been frustrated before the taping. He'd told his producers he was tired of defending a side that seemed to be defending itself from reality. So when Stephen A. started talking about arrogance, about how the Democratic Party, in his words, acts like it owns the moral high ground, but forgets to look down at the ground it's standing on, you could see Maher's smirk fade into something closer to resignation. Fans watching the leaked clips described it like watching two brothers finally say the things they'd held back for years. It wasn't hatred, it was disappointment. The kind that comes when people you believed in...
No, the Republicans don't play that. They say, hell with all of that whose turn it is. We want him. Who do the Democrats want? If you ask them today, they still don't know. They said Kamala because it was too late to say anybody else. But you didn't know who they would say if there was a primary.
And also because the Democratic Party is ideologically captured by identity politics.
I'm totally with you.
Stop believing in themselves. The tension built when Maher asked a quiet question that the microphones barely caught. "So what do we do now?" he said. It wasn't rhetorical. It sounded almost tired. Stephen A. exhaled and gave a half smile. The kind you give before saying something that's going to sting. "You start by admitting you've been talking at voters, not to them," he said. "You tell people what matters to them, instead of asking what matters to them. That's your mistake." The audience fell silent. There was no laughter, no applause.
Period.
And then here's what you did. Did you discuss the economy enough? No. You could have discussed the border because unlike Obama, who was quote-unquote the deporter-in-chief, according to the Republicans, because he deported more immigrants than Trump did.
According to not just Republicans, but Democrats. There were Democrats who called on that.
He deported more immigrants than Trump, which means he just didn't talk.
Just an uncomfortable stillness. The kind of silence that demands honesty. As the conversation went on, both men started listing everything they thought had gone wrong. The ignored warning signs, the failed messaging, the arrogance of assuming loyalty without effort. Maher said it felt like the party had decided who the people were, instead of listening to who they actually are. He joked bitterly.
What's going to happen?
Biden walks into office and day one you sign an executive order that opens the border, and you let more than 12 million immigrants cross the border illegally, and you don't think that's going to be a problem? You knew that the governors DeSantis in Florida, Abbott in Texas, and others were going to sit up there and attack sanctuary cities by busing these immigrants to your city since you had no problem with it. You were ill-prepared to deal with it, okay? All of this stuff was going on.
It's like trying to sell a meal you've never tasted. Somewhere behind the cameras, a producer whispered for them to move to a lighter topic, but neither seemed ready to stop. This wasn't a casual debate. It was a confession. Reports say that as Maher leaned back, his expression changed from anger to something close to heartbreak. "I've been fighting for democracy and the environment my whole life," he said softly. "And now I don't even know who's fighting with me." The quote went viral within hours. People called it the lonely liberal moment. Some said it was exaggerated. Others claimed the video had been cut to make it more emotional. But whatever the truth, it struck a chord. For once, Maher wasn't mocking anyone. He looked like a man watching the home team lose every game and still insisting it's just bad luck. Interview 358. 440 Stephen A. didn't let the moment pass quietly. He leaned in again and said, "You lost because you thought you couldn't lose. You forgot what hunger looks like. People don't vote out of..."
Your plan for this election was to come to women and say, forget the economy, forget immigration. Roe v. Wade was overturned. It's now a states' right issue as opposed to a federal issue. You thought that was going to be enough? You thought it was going to be enough for you to look at black men and say to black men, you're misogynistic and chauvinistic, and that's the reason why you're not voting for Kamala Harris? You thought it was going to be enough for the Latinos to bring up immigration when you're not paying attention enough that the Cubans think different than the Dominicans, and the Cubans think different than the Colombians, and they think different than the Venezuelans and the Guatemalans and the Puerto Ricans and the Mexicans, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of these
out of obligation. They vote out of hope. It was blunt, almost harsh. But the way he said it wasn't cruel. It sounded like he cared too much to lie. Viewers online later described that exchange as the turning point, the moment the conversation stopped being political commentary and became something deeply personal. Then came the moment that made everyone talk. Maher brought up the decision to clear the field for Biden, calling it a strategy soaked in arrogance. Stephen A. nodded, then added quietly, "And when that failed, you just handed it to Kamala like it was a family heirloom." The room stirred. Even Maher raised an eyebrow. "You really think it's that bad?" he asked. "No," Stephen said. "It's worse." He explained how the party had mistaken symbolism for strategy.
That you're from California. You were a district attorney here. You were a state attorney general here. You were a senator representing here. And you didn't know that the Latinos were going to say, yo, we don't like open borders? You didn't know that?
Yeah,
and so I'm looking at it and I'm saying all of these things are going on. All of these things are going on. And your argument essentially was, you didn't say it, but this is essentially your argument. It's her turn.
How they treated representation like it was the only qualification that mattered, and how voters, especially black men and Latino families, saw right through it. "You don't inspire people by telling them they owe you their vote," he said. "You earn it." Rumor has it that at this point, Maher's staff exchanged nervous glances. Some thought they'd gone too far. Others whispered that this was the most real conversation the show had ever had. The tone wasn't hostile, but every sentence landed like a punch. Maher asked, "So you think this was inevitable?" And Stephen A. replied, "No."
I'm a big, Bill, just so you know, I'm a fiscal conservative. I'm a social liberal. Live and let live, bro.
And a freak in the sheet.
You know what I'm saying?
If you're 50,
I do try.
give us a call.
I do try, no doubt. But here's the deal, man. Listen, I'm a social liberal. And what I mean by that is gay rights, absolutely. Transgender rights and all this stuff. I got no issues with you. I don't want anybody. I'm a black man. I don't want anybody's civil rights violated. I don't want anybody being persecuted in the streets of America. I don't want you being mistreated. I don't want you being denied the same rights that I have. That's fine. But the Democrats took it too far.
Oh, it was preventable. But arrogance doesn't listen until it's too late. Interview 548-6. 16 clips of that line flooded social media overnight. Comments exploded with debates. Some calling Stephen A. brave, others accusing him of betraying his side. Still, most agreed on one thing. Nobody had ever heard anyone on mainstream television talk like that about their own party. Even people who didn't watch politics started tuning in just to see what would happen next. Here, always the comedian, tried to break the tension with humor, saying, "Well, at least we'll get good ratings out of it." But even he couldn't hide the unease in his eyes. "Ratings won't fix this," Stephen replied. "Respect will." And
loud and clear.
It wasn't just about their rights. You wanted folks to like and embrace and accept everything. Excuse me. There are some people that, guess what? They might watch prostitution, but they ain't They might like porn stars, but they ain't messing with them. They might like strippers, but they ain't messing. It's all right. Do you? But I don't want it in my face. You got people that think like that, and knowing that that's the reality, and knowing that that doesn't even make up 1% of the population, you are caught on tape, if you're Kamala Harris, saying, quote, "I'm for transgender operations for prisoners."
At one point, Stephen A. dropped a bomb. He said he voted for Kamala Harris.
A rumor later surfaced that during the next break, Maher turned to his producers and said, "Let's keep it going. Don't cut anything." That decision alone was enough to make headlines. No edits, no retakes, no spin, just raw conversation. When the cameras rolled again, Maher asked something unexpected. So if not Kamala, then who? He wasn't asking as a journalist. He sounded genuinely lost. Stephen shrugged. That's the problem, he said. You don't even know who you want anymore. The conversation drifted into immigration, an issue that made both of them uncomfortable for different reasons. Stephen reminded the audience that Obama, often called the deporter-in-chief, enforced immigration law quietly but firmly, while today's leaders talk more than they act. They think compassion is policy, he said. But compassion without order isn't kindness, it's chaos. Maher nodded reluctantly. Yeah, he said, and chaos is what got us here. The audience sat still again.
I'm just saying, this is why I say
Well,
I voted for Kamala Harris, but I can't deny that strictly from a campaign perspective, Bill, he was the better candidate because he played to his constituents.
in their defense, they had a meeting and they decided that free for murderers was a good slogan.
Okay. And where did that get him? Because in the end, when you're trying to pay your bills,
Okay, but here's the
and you got peace in the streets that you worried about, you're not going for that.
here's the silver lining.
You're trying to win.
I think the election showed we're much less racially tribal than we thought we were. I mean, Trump is a strange guy to bring together all these different coalitions, but he won Latino men.
13%. They
13.
said, they said it was a 13% jump.
Oh, okay. Well, whatever
Latino
it was.
votes and a 5% jump in the black vote.
Again, the lights hummed. You could almost hear someone's breathing through the microphones. Somewhere between the frustration and the honesty, the talk turned into something rare. Two people from the same side finally admitting that maybe they'd both been wrong. Interview 6, 54, 7, 19, and yet, despite all the agreement, there was tension too. Maher accused the right of hypocrisy, of pretending to care about unity while feeding division. Stephen didn't deny it. Sure, he said, but at least they know their audience. They don't lecture their voters. They listen to them. They say what people want to hear. Maher raised an eyebrow. You say that like it's a good thing. Stephen smiled thinly. It's not good or bad. It's effective. Rumors say that after that line, someone off-camera muttered, "This is going to break the internet." They were right. By the time the discussion reached its midpoint, what started as a podcast began to feel like a reckoning. Neither man yelled, but their words cut deeper than shouting ever could. Maher admitted, "I feel politically homeless." And Stephen said, "That's what happens when your house stops fixing its own roof." The exchange wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about pride, ego, and exhaustion. Maher looked like someone mourning the loss of an idea he used to believe in. Stephen looked like someone trying to save it from itself. Behind them, producers whispered again about cutting to a break. But the control room decided to let it run. "Don't touch it," one said. "This is the story." And that's exactly what it became. The story everyone would be talking about the next morning. A rare, unscripted moment where two men stopped pretending and finally said what millions of viewers had been thinking all along. Interview 7, 47, 8, 14. The air in the studio felt heavier when the cameras came back on, as if everyone knew something had shifted, but no one wanted to say it out loud. Stephen A. took a sip of water, glanced at Maher and said quietly, "You know, I've been doing TV for years, and I've never seen people so afraid to speak honestly." Maher leaned back, his face half in shadow, and replied, "That's because honesty doesn't trend until it's uncomfortable." A small laugh rippled through the crew, nervous, unsure whether it was okay to find humor in what was happening. The next topic came like a spark in a room full of dry air: identity politics. Maher asked if Stephen A. thought the Democratic obsession with labels had gone too far. and the look on Stephen's face said everything before he even opened his mouth. "Labels divide faster than they unite," he said slowly. "You can't build a message around guilt. It doesn't inspire. It just shames people into silence." Maher nodded, eyes sharp now. "And silence," he said, "is the new loyalty test." Rumors say someone in the audience gasped when Maher said that. It wasn't an insult, it was a realization, a moment of self-awareness that cut deeper than any attack. Viewers online later said it felt like watching two insiders finally admit that the system they defended had started devouring its own. Stephen leaned forward again, elbows on his knees, voice rising a notch. "It's not that people don't care," he said. "They're tired of being told what to care about. When you talk to women, tell them about jobs, safety, stability, not just one court decision. When you talk to black men, stop pretending they're some alien species who only care about identity politics. We care about money too, about legacy, about respect. And when you talk to Latino families, stop treating them like one big vote. Cubans aren't Dominicans, Venezuelans aren't Mexicans. They've all got different stories, different scars." Maher raised his glass slightly, as if to toast that truth. "So what happened?" he asked. "When did politics stop being about real life?" Stephen gave a weary smile. "When empathy got replaced by branding, the words hit hard. The audience clapped, but it wasn't the loud, performative applause you hear on talk shows. It was slow, hesitant, like people clapping because they finally heard something they'd been waiting years to hear." Interview 8:14, 10:14, then Maher changed tone, his voice quieter, almost confessional. "You know, I used to think Republicans were the problem," he said. "But now I think the problem is we forgot how to talk to each other. I can sit with conservatives and disagree for hours, but at least they'll talk. My own side treats disagreement like betrayal." Stephen nodded, his eyes steady. "Because your side built an identity out of being right. Once you believe that, you stop listening." People on social media later described that exchange as the moment the dam broke. Hashtags popped up overnight. Says Stephen Avs Maher, "Danchu Deem Sunderfire, Garchun Truth Bomb," and within hours, clips were everywhere. Commentators from every corner of the internet weighed in, some calling it the best conversation of the year, others calling it political theater. Still, inside that studio, it felt real. Maher shifted forward, eyes narrowing, and said, "So what do you say to the people who still believe the party just needs better messaging?" Stephen chuckled softly. "Messaging? No, man. You need better listening. Messaging is what you do when you're selling something. Listening is what you do when you care." The room went silent again. It was one of those lines that didn't need follow-up. Maher broke the pause with a half-smile. "You know, you sound like someone who's thinking about running for something." The audience laughed, but Stephen just shook his head. "No," he said. "I like sleeping at night." That got a real laugh, a moment of lightness before the tone darkened again. Maher leaned in. "You really think the arrogance runs that deep?" he asked. "I don't think it," Stephen replied. "I've seen it." Rumors say that's when the control room cut to a wide shot, the kind they use when they know something memorable is happening. You've got strategists in rooms who think they understand black men because they read a poll. You've got consultants talking about immigration who couldn't find Guatemala on a map. They think hashtags replace hard work. They think representation replaces results. They think every vote is guaranteed. It's not arrogance, it's blindness. Maher's tone softened. "You really think it's that bad?" Stephen looked right at him. "Worse, because it's not just politics anymore, it's pride. And pride makes people double down even when they know they're wrong." Interview 1109, 11.40 nowadays they talked. The room grew quieter. Even the crew stopped moving. The conversation had shifted from talking about the party to talking about the culture behind it. Maher finally said, "So what happens now?" Stephen sighed. "Reality happens. The voters already gave their answer. You can either learn from it or pretend it didn't happen and lose again." A staff member later claimed Maher looked genuinely rattled at that moment. "You could see it in his face," she said. "He wasn't arguing anymore. He was reflecting." The tension kept rising when Maher tried to play devil's advocate. "But don't you think Trump represents a danger to democracy?" he asked carefully. Stephen's response surprised everyone. "Sure," he said. "But so does arrogance. Different kind, same result. Both make people feel unheard. And that's when systems break." Rumors say that line hit Maher hard. He went quiet for several seconds before muttering, "That's depressingly true." Then came the twist nobody expected. Maher mentioned Kamala Harris directly. "You've been critical," he said. "But didn't you vote for her?" Stephen nodded. "I did. I believed she could rise to the occasion. I still want her to. But belief doesn't mean blindness. I can love what she represents and still call out what's not working. That's not hate. That's honesty." The audience clapped again, louder this time. Some people even stood up. Rumors spread that at that exact moment, one of Maher's producers whispered, "We've crossed the line." But Maher ignored it. "Let him talk," he said. "This is what real conversation sounds like." And talk he did. Stephen continued, "The DNC doesn't understand that people don't want to be talked down to. They want to be talked with. They don't want pity. They want progress. They don't want lectures. They want leadership. And if you forget that, it doesn't matter how noble your message is, it won't reach anyone." Maher rubbed his temples, half laughing in disbelief. "You realize you're saying everything I've been trying to say for years," he said. "I'm just saying it louder," Stephen replied with a smirk. And yet, for all the sharpness, there was a strange warmth in that moment, a sense that maybe, underneath the frustration, both of them still wanted the same thing. The conversation shifted again, this time to the future of the party. Maher asked, "So what's next?" Stephen paused, then said, "First, stop pretending you have all the answers. Second, start asking better questions. Third, remember that politics is supposed to serve people, not egos." The simplicity of it hung in the air. It wasn't a soundbite. It was a truth too big to polish. Outside, as the show went on, reports say people were already sharing the live stream. Clips labeled "Stephen A. destroys the DNC" started trending. Hashtags multiplied. Some fans said it was refreshing. Others said it was reckless. A few claimed the conversation had been edited out of context. But by then, it didn't matter. The moment had gone viral, and the internet had decided what it meant. Back inside the studio, Maher leaned back again, looking both proud and tired. "Well," he said, "if we both get canceled for this, at least we'll have each other." Stephen laughed. "Nah," he said, "they'll cancel you first. You've got the bigger platform." Maher smirked. "Yeah, but you've got the louder mic." The laughter came again, real and unforced this time, but it faded quickly. The honesty lingered longer than the humor. And as the camera zoomed in, both men sat quietly for a moment, like two people who'd finally said everything they'd been holding back for years. But even that silence felt like the beginning of something bigger, not the end. Interview 12, 19, 12 first, 58, 12 first, 58. The next few minutes of the show didn't feel like television anymore. They felt like an intervention between two men who had finally decided to stop playing polite. Maher looked like a man dissecting a wound he didn't want to admit existed, while Stephen A. carried the tone of someone who'd been warning everyone for years. You could hear the faint hum of the lights, the shuffling of someone behind the camera trying not to breathe too loudly. Every word mattered now. Every pause hung heavy. "Let me tell you what arrogance looks like," Stephen said, his voice calm but cutting. "It's clearing the field for one man, pretending he's invincible, and then acting shocked when he falls. It's treating voters like props instead of people. It's assuming loyalty you never earned. Maher didn't argue. He just stared, jaw tight, as if realizing how much of what Stephen said lined up with his own unspoken frustration. So, what should they have done differently? Maher asked quietly. They should have listened, Stephen answered. To everyone, the single mom, the truck driver, the guy working 2 jobs just to survive. Stop talking about what people should care about and start asking what keeps them up at night. He leaned back, his expression somewhere between exhaustion and fire. You lost the people when you stopped listening to their pain. Rumor has it that line sent chills through the control room. The crew didn't move. One camera operator reportedly mouthed, "Damn!" under his breath. Social media later replayed that moment again and again, calling it the sentence that silenced Bill Maher. But Maher didn't stay quiet for long. "You know," he said, "people think I'm just being cynical, but it's not cynicism. It's heartbreak. I grew up believing liberals fought for the little guy. Now it feels like we're fighting to be the loudest guy in the room." Stephen gave a small nod. "Because noise feels like progress," he said. "But it's not. It's just noise." He then told a story that the internet would replay 1,000 times. "I talked to this kid recently," he said, "a college graduate, first in his family. Smart kid. He told me he didn't know who to vote for because both sides looked fake. He said, 'One side lies to me, and the other side lectures me.' That's what you're dealing with now. A generation that's tired of both," the audience murmured. Maher rubbed his face and muttered, "Well, damn!" Somewhere online, a clip of that moment hit millions of views within hours. People captioned it, "This is the realest thing you'll hear all week." The conversation then veered into the topic everyone was waiting for, the Kamala question. Maher hesitated before bringing it up, as if even he wasn't sure how far to go. "You've been critical of the vice president," he said carefully. "Some people think it's personal." Stephen laughed, not kindly, but with disbelief. "Personal? No, man, it's practical. She's talented, she's smart, but the strategy around her, it's built on vibes, not results. You don't make someone the face of your movement just because it's convenient. You do it because they can lead." Maher raised an eyebrow. "So you don't think she can lead?" Stephen paused. "I think she can," he said slowly, "but not like this. Not surrounded by people too scared to tell her the truth. If the DNC actually wanted her to win, they'd stop protecting her from criticism and start preparing her for battle. But they didn't. They treated her like porcelain, not like a candidate, and voters can feel that." Fans online later called that segment the porcelain quote. Even people who disagreed with him admitted the metaphor was brutal and brilliant. Maher sighed, then leaned forward again. "So what now? They can't go back." Stephen shrugged. "They can start over. They can stop pretending that every problem is about identity and start treating it like what it really is, a leadership problem. Because the truth is, you can't keep winning sympathy when people are losing jobs." The audience clapped softly again. Somewhere in the corner, a producer whispered, "We're way over time," but nobody cared. This wasn't just talk. It was raw honesty on live air. Maher, sensing the gravity, asked one more question. "You talk about arrogance. What about fear? Because I think half the reason people don't speak up is because they're scared of being canceled." Stephen's expression hardened. "Fear and arrogance are twins," he said. "One keeps you from admitting you're wrong, the other keeps you from saying anything at all." That line hit Maher so hard that he actually laughed in disbelief. "You need to start preaching," he said. "This isn't politics anymore. This is therapy." But Stephen wasn't smiling. "It is therapy," he said, "for a country that keeps breaking its own heart." Rumors say Maher sat in silence for nearly 10 seconds after that, eyes down, just nodding. Even the background music cut out. When he finally spoke, his tone had changed completely. "You know," he said softly, "I used to believe we were saving democracy. Now I think we're just arguing over who gets the credit." Stephen chuckled, though there wasn't any humor in it. "Yeah," he said. "And meanwhile, the people we're supposed to be saving stopped watching the show." The internet exploded with that clip. Overnight, it became a meme, then a headline, then a movement. News blogs called it the conversation that broke the echo chamber. Everyone had an opinion. Supporters said it was long overdue honesty. Critics called it betrayal, but both sides watched, and that was the irony. Two men tired of politics had accidentally created the most political moment of the year. As the cameras rolled, Maher leaned forward again, almost whispering now. "You know what scares me?" he said. "That people like you and me might be the last ones still willing to talk about this." Stephen's reply was quiet, but powerful. "Then keep talking," he said, "because silence is how the lies win." Somewhere in the control booth, someone muttered, "This is gold." Maher laughed lightly. Gold or career suicide? Stephen smirked. Sometimes they're the same thing. That joke landed like a sigh of relief, but the moment stayed heavy. They had touched a nerve that couldn't be untouched. Then came the part that shocked even the staff. Stephen turned the mirror on Maher himself. "You've been saying for years that liberals need to toughen up," he said. "But here's the truth. You helped build the bubble too. You called out the nonsense, sure, but you still played in the same sandbox. You can't just blame the kids for the mess." Maher froze for a second, caught off guard. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. "Fair enough," he said. "Guilty, as charged." The audience laughed again, relieved by the honesty. But behind the humor, you could feel the ache. Both men had just admitted something raw. They weren't outsiders looking in. They were insiders trying to find their way out. Stephen took a deep breath, leaned back, and said, "You know what hurts the most? It's not that they failed. It's that they stopped caring they failed. It's like watching someone you love drift away and not even notice." That line spread across the internet like wildfire. People clipped it, quoted it, and argued about what he meant. Some said he was talking about voters. Others thought he was calling out the leadership directly. Either way, it hit deep. Maher looked over, eyes soft, and said, "You really think there's still hope?" Stephen didn't hesitate. "There's always hope," he said. "But hope doesn't fix arrogance. Only humility does." The final minutes of that segment felt almost quiet, like two men staring at the ruins of something they'd both helped build. Maher raised his glass again and said, "To humility, then." Stephen clinked his water bottle against it. "To listening," he replied. And just like that, the cameras faded to black for a moment, but the silence that followed wasn't the end. It felt like the calm before another storm, one that was already building outside the studio walls. When the cameras came back, the atmosphere had completely changed. The laughter was gone. The playful tone had vanished. It felt like two men sitting in the wreckage of everything they'd just torn open and realizing that the dust was still settling. You could hear the faint buzz of studio equipment, the kind of background noise that only gets noticed when everyone stops talking. Interview 13, 53, you're 14, 37 Bill Maher looked drained. His usual smirk was gone, replaced with the expression of someone who just realized the conversation had gone further than intended, but still wasn't ready to pull back. "You know," he said slowly, "we're not supposed to say any of this out loud." Stephen A. leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes sharp but calm. "Maybe that's the problem," he replied. "Everybody whispers until it's too late, and by the time they finally speak, no one's listening." A quiet chuckle rippled through the audience, but it wasn't laughter. It was discomfort. Rumor has it, someone in the control booth whispered, They're still live? As if even the crew couldn't believe what was unfolding. Maher sighed. You think the damage can still be fixed? Stephen tilted his head. Depends on who's willing to admit they caused it. That line hit hard. Maher stayed silent, staring at the floor for a moment before taking a slow sip of his drink. You know, I always thought of myself as part of the solution, he said. Turns out maybe I was just part of the show. Stephen didn't let him off easy. You were the show, he said. We all were. We turned real issues into entertainment, debates into sound bites, truth into performance. And now everyone's wondering why nobody believes anything anymore. Everyone's wondering why nobody believes anything anymore. The room went cold. The audience didn't move. Even the sound of Maher setting his glass down seemed too loud. Reports later said you could feel the tension through the screen. It was the kind of honesty that makes everyone uncomfortable because deep down, it's too real. Maher looked up, eyes tired but searching. So what's the way out? He asked. You start by shutting up, Stephen said with a half smile. You stop pretending you have all the answers. You let people talk. You listen. And maybe, just maybe, you remember that politics isn't supposed to be about who wins arguments. It's about who helps people live better lives. Fans online later said that was the moment everything shifted. The argument had burned itself out, replaced by something that felt almost like clarity. Both men had peeled back the mask, and for a few seconds, there was nothing left to hide behind. Maher chuckled softly. You know, he said, if we keep this up, they'll start calling us conservatives. Stephen smirked. Let them call us whatever they want. I stopped caring about labels the moment they stopped meaning anything. Someone in the front row clapped slowly, unsure if it was appropriate. The sound echoed awkwardly, but it broke the tension. Maher looked toward the audience and said, That's the thing, isn't it? We built all these tribes, left, right, progressive, moderate. But none of it fixes a broken grocery bill or a kid's tuition. Stephen nodded. Yeah, he said. Ideology doesn't pay rent. Interview 1559-16-55 rumors say that at this point, both men looked genuinely emotional. The tone had gone from frustration to resignation, from anger to something almost like sadness. Stephen's voice softened. I want her to succeed, he said, referring to Kamala without naming her directly. I want the party to get it right. But wanting something doesn't make it true. You can't run on symbolism forever. At some point, you have to deliver. Maher nodded quietly. And if they don't? Stephen looked straight into the camera, his expression steady. Then someone else will. And the scary part is, they already are. The silence after that was suffocating. Viewers later said that line felt like a warning, not a prediction. Even Maher, who had built a career out of witty comebacks, didn't respond right away. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. You really think it's too late? He asked. Stephen shook his head. No, it's never too late. But it gets harder every day. You keep pretending nothing's wrong. Rumors spread that after that line, you could see Maher's eyes water slightly. Some said it was the studio lights. Others swore it was real. Whatever it was, it humanized the moment in a way no headline could. Then came the part that nobody expected. Maher turned to Stephen and asked, If you could say one thing directly to the people running the show, what would it be? Stephen didn't hesitate. Stop acting like you're owed loyalty, he said. You're not. Earn it. Stop dividing people into boxes. Stop treating disagreement like betrayal. And for once in your life, listen without preparing your next argument. The audience clapped, louder this time. Maher smiled faintly. You know, that's probably the speech half the country's been waiting to hear. Stephen grinned. Then maybe they should start saying it themselves. A few seconds of quiet passed. Then Maher raised his drink again. Well, he said, here's to the chaos. Stephen raised his glass of water. And to the hope, it still means something. The cameras zoomed out slowly, catching both of them sitting there. Not as pundits, not as performers, but as two men who had run out of excuses. The outro music started to play, low and somber, but neither of them moved. They just sat there, eyes fixed somewhere beyond the lights, maybe thinking about the storm that would follow once the episode aired. And that storm came fast. By morning, clips of their exchange were everywhere. The internet exploded, political commentators dissecting every word, supporters calling it the most honest discussion in years, critics calling it betrayal. Hashtags trended worldwide, memes, reaction videos, think pieces, all of it feeding the fire. Some said Maher had finally lost patience with his own side. Others claimed Stephen A. was secretly switching teams. But those who watched the full episode saw something deeper. It wasn't about switching sides. It was about saying out loud what everyone else was too afraid to admit. That something had gone wrong, and pretending otherwise wasn't helping anyone. Maher's team released a short statement later that day, calling it an unscripted moment of honest conversation. But insiders said the network was flooded with calls from both praise and outrage. Producers were reportedly warned to avoid polarizing follow-ups. Stephen, on his own show the next morning, didn't apologize. He didn't clarify. He just smiled at the camera and said, "Sometimes the truth makes people uncomfortable. That's how you know it's real." Fans went wild. Comment sections filled with applause, emojis, and phrases like, "Finally, someone said it." One trending tweet summed it up perfectly. He didn't destroy the party. He reminded them what one looks like when it forgets who it serves. Meanwhile, political strategists scrambled to control the damage, issuing carefully worded responses. But none of them matched the raw emotion of that night. That's what made it stick. It wasn't polished. It wasn't packaged. It was messy, real, and painfully human. As the days passed, clips from the episode continued to surface. New angles, backstage murmurs, leaked reactions from staffers. Rumors say one senior producer quit after the episode, saying she didn't sign up for truth bombs. Others said ratings tripled overnight. And in the middle of it all, both men stayed quiet. Maher didn't do interviews. Stephen didn't add fuel. They let the world argue while they sat back, watching what honesty had unleashed. In the end, what started as a casual conversation turned into a cultural flashpoint. It wasn't about party lines or personalities anymore. It was about fatigue, about pride, about two voices finally breaking through the noise. And as one fan wrote in a viral post that week, it wasn't a fight between two sides. It was a mirror. And for once, everyone had to look. As the dust settled from that explosive exchange, one thing was clear. The conversation wasn't just another headline. It was a reflection of a much bigger shift. People everywhere were replaying the clips, arguing in comment sections, texting friends late at night saying, "Did you see that?" Even those who never cared about politics before suddenly had an opinion. It wasn't about who won or who lost. It was about finally hearing something that sounded human again. And that's where you come in. Because stories like this only start the conversation. You keep it going. Do you think Stephen A. crossed the line? Or did he just say what everyone else has been thinking for years? Was this the moment Bill Maher finally turned his back on the establishment? Or just another wake-up call that will fade in a week? Let us know what you believe, because this debate is far from over. If you made it this far, you already know how rare it is to see people speak without filters. So hit that like button if you think honesty still matters. Subscribe if you want more raw, uncut moments like this. Stories that peel back the surface and show what's really boiling underneath. And don't forget to drop your thoughts in the comments, because sometimes the truth isn't in what's said on air. It's in what people say after the cameras stop rolling.